What it do, everyone? Was the scenes? How you going? Welcome to another episode of Keyona Speaks. And today I want to do a bit of reflection on the Disney movie Encanto. Now, I'm not a children's movie connoisseur. I don't recall the last time that I intentionally chose to watch a children's film. But with this movie, it sparked my interest when a friend of mine told me that, aside from this being a children's film, from an adult's perspective, she noticed themes of trauma, specifically generational trauma, and how different characteristics and roles that people have within the family system tie into a bit of toxicity or dysfunction. Now, as you know, I am a healing and self-development coach. I help women, specifically Black women and women of color, to really process their life story in the sense that we identify root causes to why they feel fear, why they establish limiting beliefs, why they feel shame and guilt, and all other mental and emotional barriers. And we tie that back into generational trauma so that, number one, they can be very clear of the subconscious behavior they were exhibiting that they had no idea about. Number two, they can understand their family system and dynamics and why grandma and mom and auntie and dad and whoever behaved and thought and projected the way that they did. And number three, with this information, they can really break the cycle of generational trauma, and they can be able to see themselves as an individual, unique person that no longer has to live their life with that shame, that guilt, that fear, that limiting belief that all stem from their traumatic experience or just coping mechanisms that they learned from their past generation who experienced the initial trauma and so forth. So watching the film and her telling me that she pinpointed, like, that's generational trauma, that's this, that's that, like, I really wanted to sit down and watch the film. And what pushed me even further to want to watch the film was looking at a YouTube video in which a therapist broke down the different characters within the family. I wish I could say the family's last name, but it slipped my mind. I think it's like Madrigal or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening to this. But she broke down each family member and how it tied into some of the patients that she helps. So I'm like, okay, a therapist is talking about this. I definitely want to watch it and to see, number one, what themes am I picking up on? And number two, where do I find myself in this film? How can I resonate, or how will I resonate with this film? So I told my husband Sunday, which was yesterday. Today is January 24th. So on the 23rd, we sat down and we watched the film. And it was really cute because I could feel myself watching the film from like an academic perspective. But honestly, guys, not only did it fulfill me in what I intended to watch the film for, but it was pretty entertaining and I could see myself watching the film a second time. So to really keep myself focused in this talk about this family, and also I don't want to do any spoilers, so I'm not going to do play-by-play, scene-by-scene. I'm just going to reflect on what I wrote in my journal post watching the film. So I wrote, I watched Encanto. I enjoyed the film. My takeaways are that the gifts the family members had were exacerbated by the grandmother as a means to preserve a miracle that got her out of a traumatic experience. They were survival coping mechanisms to overthrow the trauma from overwhelming the abuela, the grandma. She gave roles to each family member to appease her. The child who didn't possess a gift was actually purposed with alleviating the family from their gifts that they were being overworked and consumed by. Their identity was more than their gifts, but the grandmother limited them to just their gifts. The granddaughter helped them to see that they were much more. She also humanized her grandmother's trauma to help her see how it had been affecting the family. I resonated with that in my relationship with my grandmother. overall, a good film. Aside from the magic reference, I don't dabble in the magic. And I could see the film really being used academically, as well as an opportunity for family to have a discussion about, where they feel they fit in the family, what their role is in the family, and how their family dynamic, supports the survival mode of getting through a trauma, or how their family supports healing through a trauma. I feel Encanto was a protective system. Encanto meaning where they lived at. I think that area they refer to as Encanto was a protective system to comfort the traumatization of grandma's experience. So you have to watch the film to know what grandma's trauma was. But although the film, focused on each new generation or each new addition to the family, learning what their gift was, you later realize as you get deeper into the film that the gift was how they were a puzzle piece fitting into grandma's picture, so to speak, of her experience, of how they even got to Encanto, the miraculousness of their home. And the little girl, who you'll find in the film did not initially have a gift like the rest of her family members, and her feeling like she didn't belong because she didn't have a gift, she was really the gift for her family, because she was able to see from the outside looking in how each person's gift, although it benefited them, but also, like I mentioned in my journal entry, it exacerbated who they were in the role of the family. Like, if you think about your family dynamic and, who you are in your family, do you see yourself as an individual outside of that role, or have you boxed yourself in to only being that particular person? If you're the person in your family that's always creating humor to lighten the chaos, to lighten any scuffle, you'll notice that outside of your family dynamic, you may tend to do the same thing in the workplace, in your intimate relationships. And if you're not mindful of why you even are the jokester in your family, and someone feels like you're not taking them seriously or what have you, if you're not understanding why you even perform that behavior, it can make you feel some type of way about yourself. But when you come into awareness of, in my family dynamic, during rough patches, I seem to be the one to lighten the load because I am the jokester. I add, I cushion the blow because I add in humor to my family, system. When you're aware of that, then you're able to help other people, outside of your family system to understand. But then even understand that, in the workplace, in my intimate relationship with my peers, I don't have to, be the jokester. I can handle the situation how I naturally want to. And I feel like in the film, each family member did not understand that they were much more than their role. In one particular scene in the movie, there's this one young lady who is, considered perfect. I'm not going to tell you what her gift is because I really want you guys to watch the film, but a part of her gift makes her seem like this perfect, angelic, so to speak, family member that, nothing wrong happens to, etc. But what we find out towards the end of the film is, although she looks perfect and her life seems perfect from the outside, she really is suffering from this gift. And when you think about the matriarch or the patriarch of your family and how pleasing them and meeting their expectations is the sole focus of you or whomever in your family, that really throws a shadow over the, so to speak, gift. And that's what we learn from this one family member who was the perfection of the family. Her perfection was really drowning her. It was suppressing her. And until the child in the family who didn't have the gift had that conversation with her and helped her to see that she didn't have to live behind the shadows of her perfection. She didn't have to live behind the shadows of appeasing abuela. That's what everybody was doing, appeasing abuela. When when the little girl helped them to see that they were so much more than that, were they able to really move forward? But also, one thing that was important to me in the film was, in order to really heal as a collective and to move forward in the individualization of everyone and the reshaping of how people can more healthily use their gifts or their role, was talking to the traumatized person, Abuela. Abuela was holding on so tight to this miracle that was given to her after a traumatic experience that anything that was outside of that, anything that she felt attacked at, being the little grandchild that didn't get the gift, she felt like she was out of control and she was like at wit's end. But the beautiful conversation that I resonated with, that the granddaughter, the giftless, so to speak, granddaughter had with her, was that first she humanized the trauma that Abuela went through. And she helped Abuela to understand that while her grandchildren, her progeny, received gifts, that the miracle wasn't just encapsulated in that. That even though she got through that traumatic experience, like even if the miracle that they had went away, that they would be okay, so to speak. And it took them to hit rock bottom, all falls down, the miracle seeming to disappear, for the granddaughter to be able, and the granddaughter I'm referring to is the protagonist of the movie, for her to be able to penetrate the mind and the heart of her abuela, to get her abuela to see how she was overlooking this granddaughter because she was giftless, not realizing that she was the ultimate gift to the family, to reduce the burden that every single family member was holding on to or bearing for the sake of appeasing abuela, and to help abuela to see how her victimization and her fear of this trauma that she experienced was weighing heavy on her children and her grandchildren. And after that conversation, were they able to restore their family unit and each person see that, yes, while they are gifted with very unique talents within their family, but they could use it in a more healthy way and they can have more connectedness. Because there's a song that I heard way before I watched the movie that I guess beats the Frozen song Let It Go. I think it's called We Don't Talk About Bruno. In the movie, there's a particular family member that is hush hush. Now think about your family dynamic. Do you have certain family members that you just don't talk about? It's a big secret about what happened to them or their identity or what have you. Same thing in this film. There's a particular family member that they don't talk about, and they created a whole song about. And towards the end of the movie, this family member is, comes back and is, missed and loved and loved up on and joined and what have you. And the thing I like about this movie is that, for one, I see myself and my family system in this movie. I resonate with it. Number two, I like the fact that it being a children's film, I could see myself talking to my nieces, talking to my nephews, talking to my children, inshallah, God willing, I have, about, how when things happen to us, how we internalize them and how we project, what happened to us on other people. And then also just talking about the overstrong family member, the family member that thinks that they have to mask when they're in pain or when they're sad and just carry on this strength to take on everything for everyone. Like, we don't look out for the strong people. When you think about, this is kind of a tangent, but when you think about people who have committed suicide, that shocks you. People will comment on, they were so happy, they smiled, they were so helpful, they cared so much. And it's like they carried on this level of strength. They masked their actual suffering and pain. And we have to check on our strong people. We have to humanize that they go through rough patches, they go through sadness, they go through frustration. And we see in this movie that this particular character who was strong, no one really checked up on her until her little sister, who was giftless, started to check up on her. And was she able to humanize that while I am strong, while I carry a lot of the weight, I do have moments when I'm sad. There's another character who is like the healer. It's like everyone had their role. It's like a cog in a machine, the machine of the family. Everyone had their role to keep the family going. And while they're, like I mentioned, while their gifts were really, really helpful, because the matriarch was harping and holding and suppressing their gifts for her ease and her survivability, because she was still traumatized from the trauma that gave them the miracle that they all experienced, they weren't able to really enjoy their gifts. They weren't able to really see their gifts in a more positive light. And they weren't able to really support each other with their gifts as a unit, because some people saw certain gifts as a negative. They didn't see the balance of them, so to speak, especially when you watch the movie and you learn about Bruno. But I just wanted to really talk about the film, talk about my initial thoughts of it. I know if I had a guest on this podcast that watched the film as well, that would, kind of go back and forth with me about their takes on the film. And actually, if I got more deeper about like certain scenes and stuff, this podcast would probably be an hour. But I'm definitely going to keep it right here at about 16 minutes. But if you watch the film, send me an email at keonaspeaks@gmail.com. Let me know what your thoughts were about the film. If you're listening to this on Spotify, I will create a question for you to reply to about your thoughts on Encanto. And if you haven't seen the film, I definitely recommend that you check it out. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Keyona Speaks. Remember to own your story. Peace.